Welcome to our webinar. We're so glad that those of you who have joined are with us, and we're so honored to be able to have this conversation with you today. Based on this work that INSEE and the Children's Environmental Health Network and the Chisholm Legacy Project did together, we started this journey, INSEE and I, a couple of years ago, really a little bit into the COVID-19 pandemic, but also after the murder of George Floyd. We at that point were really contemplating the ways that Black children in particular were caught in what we were kind of terming the syndemic crosshairs in terms of the economic collapse that was happening, the COVID-19 pandemic, the impacts of climate change, and then of course the all of this being the underpinnings of all of this being the racial awakening and the racial justice challenges that had happened. I mean, that were in part of our history as Black Americans. And so in that, we wanted to both raise the peril that Black children were facing, but we also wanted to raise the possibilities and the promise if we move in the right direction. So in the Racism that Upends the Cradle, we detailed how the trauma of racism is experienced by Black children even before they're born, and that they're confronted with the traumatic events and systemic oppression throughout their lives with a system that was not designed to support them. We talk about the statistics and we talk about the stories of the lived realities of millions of Black children across the nation due to the racist policies and practices, and everything from redlining to the placement of hazardous waste facilities to the systemic exclusion that we face from shared resources. And so we detailed all of that, and then we also talked about the ways that we can and should have a just transition away from an extractive economy where Black folks from the time that we arrived in the United States were treated as commodities, and our communities continue to be commoditized. And so we talked about the ways that we can transition from an extractive economy into a just regenerative economy that lives in harmony with the earth and with each other, and design systems to really care for the sacred, meaning ourselves, our relationships, our planet, and that center cooperative ways of being, harmonious ways of being, and that's centered in truly deep democracy. And so that is hopefully folks have read The Racism That Upends the Cradle. That gives you enough of a teaser to read it. But today we're going to go deeper into one aspect of this work in terms of food justice. And so I'll hand it off to INSEE. It's been such an honor to work with you, and looking forward to having this conversation with you all.
Thank you so much, my dear friend Jacqui. That was beautiful. And thank you. We talked often about how writing these pieces were an emotional journey. They still are. Because this just is not right that any marginalized community, and especially our most vulnerable, our children, who have nothing to do with how we've gotten into these situations and the layers of cumulative injustice and exposures that they face. I'm trained and I'm INSEE Obot Witherspoon with the Children's Environmental Health Network, and it's been an honor to be a co-author on this piece. And this is the second installment of our public webinar series where we are trying to unpack portions of these very intense discussions. And today is around nutrition and food justice. So having a training in maternal and child health, we know that we need air, we need water, we need food. That's just non-negotiable to survive. And what we do know is that there's varying levels of access to, affordability of, and even quality of, the types of foods that children require for their brains and their bodies to develop and mature so that they can endure the many other challenges that no doubt come their way. So we're thrilled to have today some well-esteemed leaders in the field. We have LaMonika Jones who's the interim director of DC Hunger Solutions. We have Ife Kilimanjaro, co-executive director of Soulfire Farm, and Stacy Davis, the Health Equity and Community Partnerships Manager with National WIC Association. So we're going to jump right in. We welcome all of you participating. We're also recording this for those that weren't able to join at this specific time. We encourage you, as you have thoughts, just write them in the Q&A. We'll do our best to address them And if not, we'll try maybe even after with some proceeds. But wanted to give our panelists a chance to give a few minutes of introduction each, and then we have some discussions to move on with the rest of today's webinar. So Stacy, if you could join us, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Stacy Davis. I am, again, the Health Equity and Community Partnerships Manager at the National WIC Association. I am also by trade a lactation consultant and have been a lactation consultant for almost 10 years. I've been working in maternal child health for just as long, if not longer. So at National WIC, I'm in charge of the health equity portfolio, as well as some pieces of the breastfeeding work that National WIC does. And so, as we'll talk later on today, I'll share some of the work that we're doing to address inequities in breastfeeding support and promotion, as well as increasing and strengthening and diversifying the WIC workforce. Some of the work I've done in the past is diversifying lactation professionals within maternal and child health through putting Pathway 2 programs to become an IBCLC in historically Black colleges and universities. Also providing health equity trainings for academic institutions, hospitals, and community-based organizations. Some of the work I've done in the past includes operating community-based breastfeeding peer counselor and doula programs to ensure that Black women in Detroit have equitable access to prenatal and postpartum care and breastfeeding support services. So lactation and birth equity and maternal child health in general is a very passionate work for me, in that being a Black mother and having raised 4 Black sons in a system that is filled with oppression and racism, I can sympathize and empathize with a lot of the things that mothers, especially mothers of color, experience, throughout pregnancy and the postpartum period.
Stacy, thank you so much. And certainly stressors of many levels are a big part of that, right? I mean, we talk a lot about the resilience of the Black community and in all ways, shapes, and form. And yet that does not take away what the young children, even in the prenatal stage, have to absorb with that level of resilience and having to continue to move forward despite the circumstances. So definitely hear you as a fellow mother of 4, not 4 boys, but 4. Much kudos to you. LaMonika, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me this afternoon. As was stated, my name is LaMonika Jones. I am the Interim Director of DC Hunger Solutions, and our work consists of ending hunger in the nation's capital. And so the way that we primarily do that is through the highest and best use of our federal nutrition assistance programs. So we look at our federal nutrition programs. There are about 22 programs that are currently in effect. So SNAP, WIC, we have PEBT, which will be migrating over to summer EBT pretty quickly, as well as CACFP, which is the Child and Adult Food Care Program, which supports children in childcare, in traditional childcare centers, as well as in daycare homes. Also school meals, school breakfast, and a host of other programs. And so the way that we have a typical kind of 3-prong approach that we use to work here in the district. And the first one is marrying policy with practice. And so a big portion of what we do is that we look at what's happening from a federal level with our policies, and we make that digestible to district residents. And so we do that through technical assistance and outreach opportunities. So breaking down the core components of our nutrition assistance programs so that district residents can understand, well, what does this mean for me? How is it that I can utilize this information that is contained within this program to support the food and nutrition support that I need? And so we do a lot of technical assistance, whether it is working directly with our older adults. In the district, we have the highest number of older adult hunger in the entire nation. And so that is working with our older adult population, as well as with our state agency to conduct different trainings and technical assistance and outreach opportunities, increasing the number of child care centers and daycare homes that are participating in CACFP, making sure that families that participate in that have children that attend centers, that they're signed up for SNAP, that they have WIC referrals. So making sure that we are touching all across the board, all of our families. We also work a lot when it comes to our outreach with our state agencies. And so at different SNAP offices, addressing these policies, trying to see, well, what's working for district residents, what's not working for district residents, looking to see where there are gaps and where is it that we can introduce policy. So some of the things that we have done on the early care side is that we have the Healthy Tots Act. And what the Healthy Tots Act does in the District of Columbia is that it allows for an additional meal to be served to children in childcare. We know that their bellies are smaller, so they need to eat more frequently. And so what that does is that it allows a third meal to be served to children in childcare. Additionally, it gives an additional 25 cents to childcare centers that participate in CACFP, so that it's an additional incentive for them to participate in this program. On top of that, we have a Local 5 component of the Healthy Tots Act, which if childcare centers and daycare homes serve a locally grown food component with any one of their meals, they receive an additional 5 cents in reimbursement funds on top of that. So what we get to do is that we have the ability to advocate on behalf of I consider our children a vulnerable population simply because they can't go get jobs. They are, I call them our littlest eaters. They can't go and get jobs. And so they rely on us, the adults, to advocate on their behalf and do what is best for them. We also advocate for policies such as the WIC Expansion Act. And what the WIC Expansion Act does in the district is that it removes certain barriers to grocery stores so that they have the ability to expand their WIC offerings at their store, and so that they can offer more different breast milk options, different, more formula options, more, infant food options. And so they're not restricted by standards that are set forth for general stores. And so we get to work to advocate for policies that are going to best support our children as well as the families in the district. Prior to coming to DC, I oversaw all the procurement for the state of Georgia for the early care agencies. So I oversaw all the procurement and purchasing for the Department of Early Care and Learning for CACFP and summer feeding. So working with all of our child care centers and daycare homes so that they understood how is it that I can better serve the children in my child care center or daycare home by participating in CACFP. What is the benefit by me participating? What else can I do to make sure that the children that are attending my center, to make sure that they're fully supported from a nutrition perspective? And so I worked with them on different purchasing strategies, how to incorporate locally grown foods, things of that nature, how to make their reimbursement work for them. In addition to that, I also currently a racial equity fellow with the BUILD initiative. So looking at early care systems and trying to alleviate some of those racial disparities that exist on that. So taking that work and applying it to the work that I'm doing with DC Hunger Solutions, making sure that in our outreach and in our policy efforts that we are applying an anti-racist, anti-oppression lens to the framework that we're doing as we work to benefit especially those in our lowest income wards in DC, which are Ward 5, 7, and 8, with special emphasis on Wards 7 and 8, which are located east of the river, which have historically been underrepresented when we look at the whole scope of the district.
Monica, a wonderful array of available resources. I know we really appreciate all the work being done, especially among those early learning professionals who are reaching and serving the youngest of our children while these, again, formidable cognitive learning developmental stages are happening. So we really appreciate you going into some of the incentives and the support and the technical assistance that you provide. Thank you so much for that. And Ife.
Yeah, thank you. I want to echo the gratitude, Stacy and LaMonika, for the work that you're doing. And It's so necessary. So I'd love to just share a bit. I was reflecting on thinking about a conversation I had last week with a friend of mine about a number of things that are passed from one generation to the next. And she shared with me, and something that I've been sort of thinking about, that each of us who are alive today existed in partial form within the womb of our grandmothers. And, you know, and so I thought about how when my grandmother was pregnant with my mom, all of the eggs that she would produce in her lifetime were there, which meant that my DNA, a part of it, existed inside my grandmother. And so since then, and as I reflect on this report, there is so much that's passed intergenerationally from one being to another within a lineage, from one generation to another, from one society to another, and from one moment in history to another. Some things are good. We want to continue building upon, growing, evolving, learning from, and some things are not. We come into this world and we're given something, you know, again, as individuals, members of a generation, stage in the development of society. So we're given something, we're given the chance to do something with what we've been given, and we're also afforded the opportunity to create something new. But as we see here in this report and in life, as we're paying attention, a variety of forces bear down on folks that impact our capacity to experience quality life. These forces impact the quality and the duration of people's lives, what we're able to do and access. Forces such as race, class, gender, culture, ethnicity, generation, all of these things, and this enduring, this persistence of racism in particular at all levels, in policy and in practice, from the individual to the societal. They continue to oppress and enslave, leaving Black people in general and Black people in particular to bear the brunt of its impacts, the brunt of the inequities and of the traumas. When I was reading the report, it felt as though the more I read it, the more it felt like the air was being sucked out of the room. It was hard and it was painful. Each issue and story, I mean, as you mentioned and say in the beginning when you were talking, each story, each area affirms the terrible truth that I know in my heart, and that we often see that at best, what we consider to be progress is tenuous, and at worst, it's fake. It's not real. It's a facade that's created to appease our deep longing by our people who wish to be regarded no more or no less equal than anyone else. I mean, we're humans. We're all people that deserve some basic things in life. And this report, though, you know, as hard as it was to get in, to get through, just the reminder of the realities that we faced, continue to face, realities that repeat themselves, part of which we inherit and pass on from one generation to the next. We, society writ large, the laws that you know, perpetuate these various expressions of violence and so forth. But I'm grateful that in this report, Nse and Jacqui, you all also gave us some practices that we can implement within our own lives and communities, within our work environments, and that we can demand the systems and institutions with which we engage to also adopt. And so I'm grateful that that you included these recommendations for us to consider. In the area of food sovereignty, so Soul Fire Farm Institute is a farm. We're a Afro-Indigenous community-based farm that aims to end racism within the food system. And part of our work takes a number of different expressions, but part of what we do is what we have done is we've created a set of calls to action that we're taking, and we invite others to take, that I see as aligning with the recommendations that you all make make in the report. And I just want to name a couple. I won't go into any detail because they're on the website. But for example, advocating for policy changes that are designed to end racism within the food system. We're talking about like dignity for farm workers, reparations for stolen land and wealth, community-based farmer training, nourishing food for our people by fully funding SNAP, WIC programs, eliminating barriers for access, and so forth. We also offer actions that we as individuals can take to end racism in the food system. Granting reparations to BIPOC-led efforts by advancing calls for reparations that adhere to a couple of characteristics, so that, you know, I'll just name them really quickly. Nothing about us without us is one. So dispossessed people get to define what reparations look like. No strings attached. So transfers of land and resources without oversight, conditionality, and the whole pie. So giving the land, money, jobs away, even and especially when it entails personal and organizational sacrifice. So these are some core things that we consider to be valuable. And there are more that we describe within our action steps. And again, that's available on the website. But I just, you all got me thinking about so many things with this report. I'm really grateful for the data, the statistics, and the personal examples, the personal stories that are present in it. And you know, the reality, the sober reminder of a reality that we have a lot of work to continue doing. And I see this as part of that work, and look forward to what continues to come out of this work. And so I'll just stop there, and appreciate this opportunity to reflect on this.
Thank you so much, Ife. I appreciate all those personal accounts and circling back and giving some personal testimony on how the report landed with you, but also lifting up and integrating it into the very important, vital work that you're doing each and every day. So thank you for that. All right, we're going to move into our questions here. And again, invite our participants, as you have some, just use that Q&A function on the bottom of the Zoom panel there. So each of you, as we've heard in your introductions, approaches nutrition and food justice from different angles, but the goals are the same, that the basic right of sufficient, healthy, nutritious food belongs to all children to provide the best start in life. So what are the similarities in equity and justice, the challenges that you encounter and work to address in your diverse fields, working within, whether it's lactation, the WIC, school food programs, or agricultural and food distribution fields? Just wondering where you all may see some of the similarities as well as any key differences.
I think one thing that I see is that the work never stops. We continuously have space and room to advocate for and to welcome in advocates to our space. So when in DC, the way the district is set up, we do quite a bit of coalition work. And our coalitions help us to thrive when it comes to advocating not just for our children in early care, but our school-age children, as well as their parents and guardians, whether it be grandparents, aunts, uncles, mothers, fathers, older siblings, doesn't matter. And when I look at where various different groups sit, I see that there's always space for us to advocate for more. There is always additional funding that is available to advocate for more. There is always an issue at hand that we are advocating for. So currently, and I appreciate Ife for uplifting this, when we look at our SNAP and our WIC work, currently we are on the crux of a hunger cliff. Our SNAP emergency allotments will end in just 7 days. And that means that across the country, these emergency allotments that have been in effect for the past 2.5 years, they will now come to an end. In the district, on average, that's about $90 that individuals will be losing in SNAP benefits. And we know that those SNAP benefits are not enough to sustain a family. With that also comes the ending of pandemic EBT. Pandemic EBT was specifically designed to support our children. In the district, this past year, our children under the age of 6 in childcare between summer and the school year received almost $1,000 in pandemic EBT benefits to support their food resources. That's coming to an end. And so when we think about our food justice, our food advocacy, our littlest eaters, as I always call them, the advocacy never stops. Our goal is to end hunger at DC Hunger Solutions, to end hunger in the nation's capital. And that means that until every single person has equitable access, not just equal access, but equitable access to necessary and affordable food. And so we have to build that in there as well, until every district resident or every person, dare I say, in our entire nation has access to equitable food resources, affordable resources, the knowledge and understanding how to nourish themselves, whatever that may look like to you, whether it is growing your own food, whether it is adequate transportation to a grocery store, whether it is how is it that I access these different resources. Until every single person in the district has the ability to nourish themselves, we will continuously be working to end hunger in the nation's capital. And so we have different policies that we have passed in the district to support that. So we have Give SNAP a Raise, which was in effect before these ending of these emergency allotments. And so it looks at what your maximum federal benefit is for SNAP, and if there's a 10% increase that you'll get on top of that. So an individual could be receiving almost $300 in SNAP. A family of 4 could be receiving almost $1,000 in SNAP benefits. And so there's always a space for us to advocate, especially when we are looking at our most vulnerable communities in the district. That tends to be Ward 7 and 8, east of the river, because there's a lack of resources when we talk about the other side, east of the river, not wards 1 through 6, but those on Ward 7 and 8. And so there's always room for us to advocate for looking at what are the challenges when it comes to our early child care centers, our daycare homes with participating in our federal nutrition assistance programs. What types of hurdles do they experience? Not just looking at food and not just siloing ourselves in food, but looking at the entire system, every system across the board. And so I see a lot of our challenges are similar no matter what we're advocating for. But from where I sit and from what I see, the advocacy, it doesn't stop, because there's always a voice and a face and a person and a human that we advocate for on a daily basis.
And I'll just piggyback on what LaMonika said and say that when we're thinking about advocacy for children to address hunger, we should be also advocating for the littlest ones, and that's infants. So thinking about how do we increase equitable access and culturally relevant and sensitive support to breastfeeding support services and pregnancy services. How do we advocate? Because I think the infant formula crisis had us kind of switching the way we think about infant feeding, and recognizing like we've, as WIC and even as other entities addressing childhood and infant hunger, is like we relied so much on talking about infant formula. And when that became a case of where that wasn't a readily available resource, and often we had to outsource it, to other countries to obtain, access to infant formula, we didn't put behind that same effort in ensuring, like, letting parents know they had alternative options and what those alternative options were, and increasing the amount of support and resources at a community level that parents could access in order to, relactate or, even initiate breastfeeding within their own families and circles. So I think it's important that we, think about that. I'm a part of a few groups around hunger, and I'm always constantly bringing or raising that we need to incorporate breastfeeding into these conversations, because breast milk is the first optimal food for infants, and we don't want to continue to put out the narrative that infant formula is a matching alternative to breast milk, because the fact is it's not. It cannot be replicated on any level in any form. So ensuring that when we're having these conversations about addressing hunger for children, that we're talking about, breast milk as an option, and we're talking about what resources are needed at a community level, and that we're partnering with other organizations who provide that support. And so that we're not working in silos, we're working collectively together as organizations or even as individuals.
Thank you. And Ife, did you have any thoughts on this one before we move on to many other questions?
Yeah, nothing new, but I think drawing out the underlying connections, it's been said, resources are huge. So having access to resources and technical, in my language, technical support or information that is necessary about how to get those resources. So those I see as some underlying, and we see them in the work that we do at Soulfire Farm and getting food out to families as well.
Great, thank you so much. So another question for folks to contemplate is, how can we affect the types of changes in some ways you've already talked about, but at a systems level, and get to a place where from birth, our children enjoy a restored and deep relationship with the earth and with natural systems and practices, including natural eating, and all of the spiritual, mental, and physical health benefits of that restored relationship.
That can happen. Affecting change at a systems level. That's huge. And I think my short response to that is by both continuing to reform the current system to try to make it better for all folks, and in particular, it's not even in particular, if we're improving the well-being of the folks who are most marginalized, who are most harmed by the current system, then that necessarily helps everybody else to benefit as well. So by reforming the current system to be better, while also supporting, resourcing groups who are seeding new things. So it's, and by new things, the embryonic formation of new societies, of ways that ways of doing things, living and being in the world and being in relationship with one another that reflect the values that you mentioned, where we're able to appreciate where food comes from, how it's grown, what goes into it, be a part of that, and be in relationship with the environment that creates that. Be open to the spiritual connection and lessons that come from appreciating the fact that we have relatives that take on other forms than the human being form. And that may sound strange in a call like this, but this is fundamentally a recognition of our place as one of many, many species among the human and in the animal kingdom. And we're relatives, we're related genetically to all other living beings within this ecosystem, and that we've kind of established this hierarchy has led to our behaving with one another and in the natural world. I'm not trying to reduce this is not the only reason, but this kind of mindset makes it easy to see others as less than, and therefore can be used in service of my benefit as an example. So I think that, again, I'll just say that we want to continue to do this work around reforming the system so that it can it can do better for those who are harmed by it or who are least regarded by it, while at the same time supporting the development of practices and of communities and economic systems that that represent and embody the kinds of values that are most important to us. Like, the report mentions being in a kind of regenerative relationship, or maybe that's my language, but that's how I interpreted it, regenerative relationship with the natural world.
Thank you all so much. We do have a question from my mom, but it's a good one, right? As far as engagement and the fact that we all know that these various broken systems did not happen overnight. The fact that intentionally communities that we're talking about, our Black, our brown, our lowest wealth, if you will, are consistently pushed aside and not given the type of balanced, equal exposure and opportunities, to thrive and do what I believe folks are here to do, which is live in the most healthy and safe way. So our older young people, are fascinating, and they are giving me hope, right? And they're starting nonprofits, and they're adding their voice to picket lines and doing so much, especially on the climate justice side of things, in addition to poverty and many other issues. How are you currently engaging, or might you suggest that we continue to think and elevate and lift up engaging our youth to ensure that they are supported and encouraged, because their anxiety is real, right? When they think about their futures. My own kids have a hard time thinking past 30s at times, right? Because they're so dismayed by what is happening around them. They see the climate changing, they see their friends all too often getting sick. They are seeing the repercussions of these ill-willed systems. So any thoughts on how you're currently, or how you suggest that we do not forget about engaging our youth in this work?
So I want to answer this question in combination with the systems question that we had previously. And so when it comes to systems work, as well as engaging our teenagers. So as a caveat, I used to be a high school teacher. I used to teach middle and high school students. And that was the number one thing that we used to try to get was, how do you get teenagers involved? Because they are teenagers. We all used to be teenagers, and they're just teenagers. And so I am a big advocate of releasing what no longer serves you. And so when we are looking at our system, I think, and we are trying to make adjustments, it's a necessity for us to release those things that are no longer serving us, the parts of the system that are no longer serving us, in order for us to create a new system. So I'm of the mindset that a system is designed to do something, and the system that we are currently a part of is doing exactly what it was designed to do. However, in order to have a system that truly supports us in the way that Ife mentioned, we have to create a new system, and that includes the voices of those who would benefit and maximize from our system. And that is our young voices, our older children, our teenagers, our middle school age students. A lot of the work that I've done with that particular age group is finding out what sort of challenges do you see, and incorporating your voice, your vision. What do you want to see for the future? A lot of times when we make decisions from a systems perspective, from a policy perspective, we make those decisions from the top down. We don't make those decisions looking at those who would benefit and maximize from the decisions. So from the bottom up. And I think in order to incorporate and in order to have a a system, a framework, a society that truly, truly maximizes and supports the individuals, especially those that need our support or that desire our support, our most vulnerable populations. We have to incorporate their perspective. We have to incorporate what is it that they say is missing? What is it that they say that we need? What is it that this other system did not do or chose not to do that intentionally pushed me out? How can we build this new system so that it is intentionally inclusive, that it respects my viewpoints, it respects my needs, it honors who I am as a person, as a part of this system, and that includes our younger voices. And so one of the things that DC is intentionally doing to include and make sure that our older children, our middle schoolers, our teenagers, to make sure that even our college students, because to be real honest, sometimes we do have college students who just go to class and they're not doing anything over the summer. Going to class is a lot. And so they're looking for different outlets on how to grow and maximize on who they are as college students as well. But one of the things that DC is intentionally doing is that they're having an event called Summer in the City. And what Summer in the City does is that it allows nonprofits, government agencies, just those organizations that sit inside the district to highlight how is it that you can become involved in the city that you're living in. You see what's going on, you see the different elements that are at play, whether it be economic insecurity, whether it is lack of adequate housing, lack of safety, lack of food resources. How is it that these basic human needs, how is it that you can become a part of this, gain exposure, and somehow the sparks begin to fly? When I was a high school teacher, that's what I did. A lot of my education was around educating my students, was around exposure. Give me one thing that you like to do, and I will open your mind up to 1,000 different possibilities. So for example, I had a student who wanted to be a chef. Why do you just want to be a chef? Did you know that you can be an ingredients buyer for Tostitos? We introduced him to an ingredients buyer. She had a culinary license and was making 6 figures. And so we exposed him to that. We exposed him to the business side of that. And so I think for our teenagers, one of the things that we want to make sure that in the district, besides just giving them something to do, is exposing them to different ways that we can grow their minds, that they have some tangible skills that are transferable once they graduate from college, graduate from high school, and prepare them for what's next, whether that is for college or it is to join a workforce. But whatever it is that they decide to do, that they have a skill set or a level of understanding and knowledge that will push them forward. And so when we're getting our students engaged, I think it is not just establishing what it is that is available, but actually having some conversation with them. And that goes for any age group that we are trying to support. Who is it? What is it that you need from us? Instead of making the assumption and making the decision for them and taking the power of their voice away from them, but giving them the power to decide what is it that they would like to see, and then offering some guidance on how we can shift that so that we can better support them on all fronts across the board.
Great. I know, Stacy, you came off mute briefly when on the systems question. I don't know if you had anything to add there or on the latter question about youth engagement, but if not, we can move to the next.
I would just say in terms of youth engagement, just putting, like when we are talking about health programs or like health of our bodies and things, like we're talking about all things that incorporate the body. So, you know, in middle school or even elementary school, talking about, you know, the functionality of the breast and what it was intended to do, so that as kids get older and grow up, it's not a culture shock, or it's not a shock of, or kids are feeling like it's some type of indecency that's happening based off of what society has deemed, you know, breastfeeding as. You know, as a mother of 4 sons, like each of my sons have seen it. So when they see a woman breastfeeding, they're not gawking, they're not staring, they're not making people uncomfortable. or they're not asking, weird questions about, what is she doing? Why is she doing that? What happens? Because they already know it's like a part of normal life. I think once we start normalizing it at younger ages instead of waiting until we're adults or, or until we're like in college, will help, mitigate some of the issues that we see in terms of disparities or mitigating the fact that there just aren't enough resources out there to address the inequities and the disparities that exist today. So I say having those conversations or, introducing, children as young as possible to, breastfeeding diets, and so that they see that and it's a normal part or course of life, I think is important. As well as creating opportunities for internships within organizations, even for, not waiting until kids are in college, looking for internship opportunities, introducing middle schoolers and high schoolers to opportunities, introducing them to training programs. I don't think there's an age where an age limit or minimum requirement to become a breastfeeding peer counselor. I don't think there's an age limit on when you can become a doula. Knowing that there's all various different kinds of doulas, birth doulas, postpartum doulas, doulas that deal with death, doula in every aspect of life that we come across. So introducing them to those opportunities, as well as letting them know that's another second stream of income, or, that they can participate in. Or letting them know like those are opportunities where you can go out and educate your community on, talking to your, your social and your family circle about all the benefits and the resources attached to that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know, Nse, were you going to ask the other Q&A question, or did you answer that in the Q&A?
Yeah, it seems like it was a set of wonderful recommendations and thoughts. You want me to just read it real quick from Jewel Crawford? Thank you so much, Jewel. In terms of a systematic approach, what about working more with the schools and also the churches and setting up after school and Saturday schools? We need to seek funding to pay for these programs. When Harvard and Georgetown and other institutions admit to their role in slavery and offer up funding, we need to direct this funding as reparations to pay for these type of programs. We can train our young people and pay them to teach the younger ones. I think we would agree with all of that. And there's definitely precedence to that. Reach One, there's many ways that our older youth are giving back in pretty phenomenal ways, and to magnify and leverage that is the goal. Please, Jacqui.
Thank you. Okay, so we're to kind of concretize some of this, what we've been talking about. We're hoping that folks can share a few case examples that you're working on or that you're a part of in any way that are working to really explicitly advance racial justice as it relates to children's health, food justice, and so forth.
I can go. I don't know if we're necessarily, addressing some of the things that you mentioned, but National WIC Association is definitely working on addressing disparities and inequities around nutrition education and breastfeeding. And so one of those things is diversifying the WIC workforce. We already know that WIC staff is not necessarily reflective of the communities in which it serves, and that, when we look at registered dietitians in that field in particular, we know that over 80% of registered dietitians are white women, and so that only 6% are Hispanic and only 10% are BIPOC, meaning that 6% is Asian, and I think like 3% is like Black, and 1% is like Asian or American Indian or Native. So looking at that, looking at IBCLCs, there's 33,000 IBCLCs worldwide. 18,000 of those live in the US. but a very small percentage of those are Black, Indigenous, people of color. So creating opportunities within WIC where we can help folks obtain those credentials by providing scholarship opportunities, paying for college tuition, books, resources, and things of that matter, so that we are ensuring that our WIC staff and at the state and local levels are reflective of the participants that they're serving, in order to provide that culturally appropriate and sensitive support and care that they need in order to feel successful. I know as a breastfeeding mother, when I became an IBCLC 10 years ago, in the state of Michigan, there were 5 of us in the States. And so that speaks to, living in a huge community as Detroit that's, predominantly Black community, and not having, support that was reflective of me, who I was as a Black woman, was huge. And not really understanding that part of my success was, or lack of success, was based off of not having the resources and folks who understood the unique circumstances that I came from as a Black woman, and knowing that even before I was a mother, or even before I was a parent, there were instances that continue to impact my life and my abilities as a mother and as a woman in general. So going back to what a few of you said earlier, in that, history has impacted us in one means or another. Thinking about, slavery days, and even after slavery, when the Civil War came, that, breastfeeding wasn't necessarily a choice for us. And it definitely wasn't a choice for us in terms of having the ability to provide our own breast milk for our own babies. It was something that we was forced to do for the white masters and their children, because they understood the importance of breast milk and how it was optimal for health. But we as a Black community weren't able to attain or achieve that success, and making sure that was something provided for our own children. So National WIC Association is doing that. We're creating more partnerships, or seeking out intentionally partnerships with organizations of color within the field of lactation and nutrition education. Because we know that once we equip our staff with those resources will again turn into opportunities. And we already know, again, those unique circumstances that people of color face aren't necessarily the challenges that our counterparts face. So creating partnerships with organizations, like we just created a partnership with the Melanated Memory Atlas. And it's a mobile tool for the lactation field, in that it's a book of images that shows different breast conditions and skin conditions amongst people of color. It's a resource that I use in a different format, which was predominantly white skin and white skin conditions. And we know that skin conditions on white skin and color skin look completely different. And so not having that resource when I was sitting for my examination was huge. And so bringing that resource to National WIC members, so that staff have access to that tool, and it's free access for them to have, and they're not having to pay for that. Providing them with the scholarship opportunities. We're probably giving away close to $250,000 in scholarship opportunities to ensure that we're diversifying registered dietitians and our IBCLCs. We're creating cohorts of staff at the state and local level, and training them in the train-the-trainer model on EDI, and so that those folks are able to go back to their communities and train folks within their communities. So we're creating a network of EDI professionals that have specific focus on WIC. So with that, we're addressing the inequities and the health disparities in WIC, and we're making the WIC program a more accessible program. We're looking at how do we incorporate resources that are equitable. We're looking at how do we make the program more how do we make the program look differently for various different folks, like people with disabilities, you know, and their shopping experiences as a person with disabilities, and how they're cooking food and preparing food and getting the food that they need. How are we looking at access to WIC services, making sure that access to WIC remains a service that's remote, where folks aren't having to come to WIC clinics to get their certifications and recertifications and all of that. So we're working really hard on addressing EDI at various levels to make it a more positive experience, not just for our staff, but also for our participants.
Thank you so much, Stacy. Oh, Ife, please.
Hi, thank you. I'd love to share some of the programs that we have at Soulfire Farm. Our impact is, or our footprint is a bit smaller in some ways because we're a local community farm. But one of our oldest programs is called the Solidarity Share Program, which was in existence even before we incorporated as a C3 in 2016. And with this program, we provide no cost doorstop delivery of vegetables, fruits, medicine, eggs, value-added products that are grown and created on the farm. And these go to families who live under food apartheid in the Albany, Troy area in upstate New York. And just as an example, in 2022, we were able to provide food, fresh foods weekly in this program between April and October to 23 families and to 4 community distribution locations. And that impacted, or that served, over 650 people monthly during that time period. We also provide training, farmer training for Black farmers and people of color in our week-long immersion programs that are scheduled during the summer. So these are, this is a place where folks learn how to grow food, how to set up their food growing business, and are doing so within a community of folks who are also interested in doing that. This year, we're introducing 2 additional trainings, which include forest skills, so where people can learn how to leverage the resources within wooded areas, within forests, to feed themselves and to grow potentially business, and also farm to table immersion. So how do we take food that's been grown on the farm and process it into foods and goods that can be eaten, shared, and distributed out beyond the family. So we're introducing a couple new. We also offer carpentry training so that folks can learn how to build their own things. We also structures, so not just things, but structures. We also compile curricular resources on food justice. These are available on our website. If you go to soulfirefarm.org and click the resources tab, you can see there's a ton of material there. And we also have a number of educational videos on the website, all led by farmers, growers, healers of color, and to share, and help people who are watching learn how to do things. So it's in these kinds of ways that we're helping to grow the skills, knowledge, and hopefully inspire new ideas of folks who are looking to grow food on their own. All folks, but we're really looking at building, as part of our effort to uproot racism within the food system, part of our informal theory of change, because it's not yet kind of formally stated in this way, is we want to train as many Black, Indigenous, people of color farmers as possible to get out there and transform the food systems within their communities.
Thank you so much. I know LaMonika is going to share, and we're going to wrap after that. So thank you, LaMonika.
I'll be brief. So one of the things that we are working on here at DC Hunger Solutions is hosting a sessions on early childhood. There are early childhood community roundtable discussions, and the goal of these discussion groups are to address the racial disparities that families may experience when trying to access our federal nutrition program. So what do our families of color experience as they are trying to sign up for high quality childcare in the district? What challenges may they be experiencing when signing up for SNAP, going through the recertification and mid-certification process, as well as when it comes to accessing WIC benefits? And so having these roundtable discussions with a hyper focus on wards 5, 7, and 8, which are typically our lower income wards in the district, but having these intentional conversations with families with children in early childcare. And this all centers around our anti-racist, anti-oppression approach. And so we don't want to just find out what the challenges are. We want to embed some solutions that are within that. And so determining what these solutions look like, whether it is additional reimbursement at the local level, more of a focus on farm to early care and education, more tools on how to implement some of those initiatives back at the home level, and not just the child care, daycare, home level. And so we're really excited about our early childhood nutrition roundtable discussions. In addition to that, we continue to advocate. Policy and advocacy are two of the things that we do really well, and that we are at the core of who we are. And so looking at our latest piece of legislation that'll affect our school children, which is universal school meals. Breakfast is already free for all district students, whether they attend DC public schools or DC public charter schools, which 50% of the students, we're right at half. We've got about 46 and 54% of our students attend a public or public charter school in the district. And so this Universal School Meals Amendment Act would make lunch free for all of our students. And so that means that all meals across the board for district students, regardless of your age, will be free. And so really working to amplify that and to advocate heavily for that with the work that we're doing with DC Council. And so we also release a series of reports every year. So we have a school breakfast report card, a school meals report card, and we're looking at the end of our early childhood nutrition roundtable discussions, releasing the first iteration of an early childhood nutrition report, which would address the efficacy of early childhood nutrition programs. So CACFP, PEBT, summer EBT, farm to early care and education, the role that each one of those plays when it comes to early childhood nutrition. So those are just some of the things that we are currently working on in 2023 that we hope to continue to amplify within the district.
Thank you all so much. This has been an incredibly rich discussion, and we have a lot of the participants eager to see the resources and the links. I just want to confirm that we will be sending around those links to all registered attendants, those participants, and the plan is to have a rebroadcast of this. So yes, we would welcome everyone gathering whomever you think should and need to listen to these messages. And please do encourage you to share these resources widely, let people know about these incredible efforts happening. Really appreciate Stacy reminding us continuously about the need to protect our most youngest, our prenatal, and really stressing the diversification of the workforce that then supports those women who are, and let's face it, there's a cultural background here too of there's a consistency where women that come to the US tend to have reduced levels of breastfeeding rates, unfortunately, and there's a lot of reasons for that, right? But starting with the fact that a lot of employers and a lot of other circumstances are not conducive to supporting that mother in kind of that journey, which can be challenging, right? But is not insurmountable. And thank you so much, LaMonika, for reminding us about the many, many ways that their existing programs in the district and throughout the country are vital to providing the type of sourcing and the type of support and the nutritional value that young minds so desperately need. And thank you for the work in early learning childcare. We care so much about that. And we know that children are in those facilities anywhere from 6 weeks to 5 years of age in the United States. So that's incredibly important for their growth and development, and the range of other activities you've mentioned, and Ife reminding us about the generational impacts, and very eye-opening in the very beginning to remind us that yes, we are actually a part of our grandmothers, which is fascinating, and all the good and the bad and the challenges and the trauma and the positives that go with that, right? Before we're even born. We didn't even get a chance to get into pesticide exposures and some of these other chemicals that are lacing our food systems, right? So really reminding us that there's a different way to do this. The systems, the food systems that are currently in existence have been intentional. There's a way to break these cycles. There's many wonderful efforts. These are 3 examples here working day in and day out. And Jacqui, thank you as usual for your partnership and your leadership, and appreciate everyone's time today. And please do reach out to any one of us if we can help in any way with the journeys that you're all on.